Scripture. And if you have to do something, abort means to stop life, and fetus is Latin for young life. So I'm just not going to stop it. I'm going to let him come and talk. And before that, let me quick out on his table. He has Prolife reflections every day for you to take and read and pray for the life of the unborn and the elderly and all the other things that they're doing. He's got one on abolishing abortion. And then this is the big one, ending it. And we want to see it in the next time, this year. If this next year is ended, we want all abortion to quit. In Jesus' name.
Thank you all. Thank you, Christy and Kent. I'm so grateful for the invitation, for you having me come here today, and so grateful to be with all of you. Many of you I have seen and spoken with before in various parts of Oklahoma as I have traveled the length and breadth of your state over these many years of my national work with Priests for Life. So it's good to be with you again. I remember being at the State House for the Rose Day some years ago, and some of you here were legislators at the time, and we had a great day that day, like we're having a great day here today. I want to thank all of you right away for your own commitment to defending the most fundamental, the most basic right we have, and the condition for all other rights. As has been mentioned a few times already today, if we don't have life, we don't have anything.
That's right.
Candidate comes along, I got a great education plan. Oh really? For the babies that you're allowed to be killed in the womb? Those are the ones you want to educate? I got a great health care plan. For whom? The living or the dead? You take away that child's life, you've taken away her health care, her education, her right to vote, her right to work, her right to immigrate. In fact, yes, we have an immigration problem, and there's also all sorts of problems at the border. But how about children who want to cross the border of the womb? How about the first immigrant that wants to make a little journey from where she is to where she wants to go, and they're not being detained at the border, they're being dismembered at the border.
Come on.
You go on and on, brothers and sisters, any issue that we're concerned about, and we are rightly concerned about all issues. But an issue is an issue in the first place for one reason. It impacts human life.
Yes.
So this is not just one issue among many when we talk about abortion. When we talk about the right to life, this is not just one issue. This is the heart, the core, the soul, the foundation of every issue. It's not only true, which it is, to say that it's the most important issue, that if you're wrong on abortion, it doesn't really matter much if you're right on everything else. But I'll go further than that. If you're wrong on abortion, if you're wrong about the right to life, you can't be right on any other issue. Because then your advocacy for human rights is an illusion.
Yeah, that's good.
Because those rights no longer belong to those humans because they're human. Because you're supporting abortion, you're saying life itself belongs to humans, not because they're human, but because some court said so. Or some king or governor or prince said so, or some mom or dad or doctor said so. No. We don't get this right, everything else is building on quicksand. How can we teach a country to stop killing the guilty by capital punishment if we haven't learned to stop killing the innocent? How are we going to feed the poor if we can't feed our own children? How are we going to, as I mentioned already, welcome immigrants across the border the proper way if we can't welcome children across the border of the womb? And how are we going to maintain peace between nations if we can't maintain peace between a mother and her own child? It won't work. First things first. And brothers and sisters, that's why I, some decades ago, experienced in my own life a call of conscience. A call of conscience to devote myself full time to doing everything possible to save the unborn and to awakening the churches and beyond the churches, awakening all Americans that this is in fact our fundamental challenge. And God has blessed this work, and He's blessed me with the inspiration I get from people like you and people in this movement who are doing so much. A movement which I am more convinced than ever, having done pro-life work full-time now for the last 26 years, I'm more convinced today than I ever have been. The days of legal abortion in this country are numbered. This is ending. We are winning. We are on the path of victory. But I say to pro-life activists all over the place, we're not just working for victory. We are working from victory. Victory, the victory of life, is our starting point. We begin with the victory. And what is that victory? Jesus Christ, now risen from the dead, dies no more. Death has no more power over Him. And because we are members of His body, He is the head, we are the members, we share His Spirit, we are together, all united in Christ. If death has no more power over Him, it has no more power over us. In Christ, we share the victory over death. Yes, we must still die, but as Scripture tells us, we die in Christ. Death has no more power over the head or the members of the body of Christ. We start with victory. If we didn't start with victory, we wouldn't be the church, we wouldn't be the pro-life movement, we wouldn't be at this conference. Because there'd be nothing to have faith in.
Wow.
If Christ not be raised from the dead, your faith is vain, it's empty. So there wouldn't be a Faith and Freedom Conference if Christ were not raised from the dead, which means if we didn't already have the victory, we wouldn't be able to fight for it. But we both have it, and we are fighting for it. And the fight is real, and the enemy is real, and the damage the enemy does is real, but the culture of death and the power of abortion and all the other evils that we come together in the name of Jesus Christ to fight, you know what they are, my friends, ultimately? They are the echoes of a defeated kingdom.
Yes.
The echoes. The final outcome of this battle has already been decided. Well, let me back up a little bit because I want to start with you the way we urge clergy to start. One of our key missions is getting clergy to speak up on this matter of abortion. And I know some of you here are pastors, and I thank you for your commitment to the ministry. And, working with not only Catholic priests, but pastors of all denominations, we find some common patterns, things they may be afraid of. And we're trained to be compassionate men of following the Good Shepherd. We want to have the heart of Christ, ministering to His people as those called to ministry are meant to be. And as men and women who try to show the compassion and the love of that heart, we don't want to hurt the people in our congregation. And this is what causes some to make the mistaken conclusion that therefore, they ought to be silent about painful subjects, like abortion. Because they say, there are people in the congregation that have had abortions, and we don't want to hurt them. Well, of course there are, and of course we don't. But what's going to hurt them and what's going to help them? If someone's sitting there in the congregation suffering tremendous pain, guilt, and grief from an abortion they had, maybe recently, maybe a very long time ago, and they hear nothing coming from the pulpit on that topic,
That's right.
what are they going to conclude? Well, my pastor doesn't know my pain, or if he or she knows it, there's not much that can be done, I guess. Or maybe they know it and, they don't really care. No, we do know, it does matter, there is something to be done, we do care, and that's why we speak. We speak in compassion for them, precisely to lead them to healing. Christ, who is life itself, is also mercy itself. He's the one in whom we find healing, and so we lead people to healing. We're not going to lead them to healing if we don't talk about it. Not to mention the fact that if we have, in fact, compassion for those that are suffering the pain of abortion, doesn't that mean we want to save other people from experiencing it in the first place? And that's why so many who've had abortions, when we help their pastors to speak about it, are grateful because they know that someone out there is going to be spared the terrible pain that they've suffered for years or decades. And so what we say to the pastors is this, but it applies to all of us whether we're talking about this issue in private conversation or blogging about it or sending out, messages in whatever way we all are able to communicate. You start with two things. Number one, no abortion is ever necessary. We are here to help. The bulk of the time and the energy and the resources and the efforts of the pro-life movement is precisely to provide alternatives to abortion. We don't stand before the world pointing fingers of judgment and condemnation and saying, this is evil, don't do it. That doesn't summarize our message. It's not pointing fingers of condemnation. It's extending hands of help and hope and mercy and saying to those who are in despair, come with us, take our hand, let us lift you up in the name of Christ from the despair that leads you to the abortion clinic. You see, people don't get abortions because of freedom of choice. One of the many things that's wrong with that slogan that some people try to use to defend abortion, besides its philosophical, logical, and moral, twisted, and corrupt attempt at being an argument in the first place, the first problem with it is, it's contrary to fact. People who are getting abortions today aren't getting abortions because of freedom of choice. They're getting them because they feel they have no freedom and no choice. They feel trapped, abandoned, desperate, afraid, and sadly they think that the only person who can help them is the abortionist. We come with good news. It's the good news that the Gospel of Matthew begins with when it says, he shall be called Emmanuel, a name which means God is with us. And then at the end of Matthew's Gospel, before he ascends into heaven, he says to them, and I am with you always until the end of the world. What do we say to the world in the name of Christ, including those tempted to have abortions? We look them in the eye and we say, in the name of Christ, I am with you. We are with you. The church is with you. The pro-life movement is with you. We're not here against you. We're not here as your enemy. We are here as your brothers and sisters. Take our hand and rise up out of that despair that would lead you to the door of that abortion clinic. This is the first thing we say. And we equip the churches. In our breakout session, we're going to go into some very practical things that you can use yourself and bring back to your churches. For example, let me give you one of them right now. If every church had on its website and in its bulletin the simple website pregnancycenters.org, anyone, anywhere in the country, going to that website and putting in their zip code can find the places where they can get alternatives to abortion. People ready to counsel them, people ready to help them with job and education opportunities that they can pursue while having the child, medical and legal advice, whatever help they might need. Pregnancycenters.org. What a simple way to save lives, to equip the people to do the work of God, saving lives in the world, changing despair into hope. Hope that says yes to life. Second part of the message. Number one, no abortion is necessary. We're here to help you. There are alternatives. Number two, we who reject abortion do not reject those who have had abortions, but rather we embrace them with the mercy, forgiveness, and compassion of Christ himself.
Amen.
And brothers and sisters, this is a crucial part of the message, not only for the primary reason that it helps those who are in this pain to find that forgiveness and mercy and help, but also because it shows again the true face of the church and the pro-life movement. And that's going to help other people get involved in the movement. Many people are against abortion, but they don't want to get involved in the pro-life movement because they perceive it as a movement of judgment and condemnation and negativity. No. We embrace those who have been through this horrible pain. Some of our political opponents will say, oh, you people just want to throw the women into jail, when they want to change the laws so they go to jail. And I said, listen, those that have had abortions, they're already in prison.
That's right.
They already are in a prison of shame and pain and regret, devastation of their self-esteem, of their view of themselves, of their view of God, of their relationships crumbling to pieces, inability to make decisions. You go on with the psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical negative effects of abortion. There are entire books that are just bibliographies of the studies of the negative impact on abortion. That's why it's so hypocritical for those, again, our opponents on this issue, to say that they're concerned about women's health. Not one of them is concerned about women's health. Because if you're concerned about women's health, you're going to at least ask the question, what does abortion do to women's health? They don't want to even ask that question. They don't want to even imagine for a moment that there can be any negative impact of abortion on women's health. And yet, again, we didn't make it up. The studies are out there. Look them up. In fact, there's a group called APART, the Association on Post-Abortion Research and Training, and they say stand apart. This is a part of the movement that stands apart from the legal and political dimensions of the battle, which are crucially important and about which I'm going to say some things, but they are focused essentially on this one question: what impact does abortion have? And that is a question that we must continue to put before people. And one of the books out there, by the way, Christy mentioned some of the books I have out there, but let me point out two more of them. Janet Moreno wrote a book called Recall Abortion, to play on the word recall, because those that have had abortions recall it very, very painfully. But when a product damages the consumer, what are you supposed to do? Recall it. Get it off the shelves, get it off the market. Recall Abortion, fantastic book, the voice of those. Janet co-founded the Silent No More campaign, which was one of the aspects of our ministry. And under that ministry, too, the shockwaves of abortion. You know, it doesn't just impact, obviously it kills the baby. And we've seen more and more over the years how the moms and the dads come out and share their painful experiences. But did you ever think how many grandparents are suffering from the loss of their grandchild to abortion? Either the guilt of having been complicit in it, or the other side of that coin, the pain of having tried to stop it but failed, or maybe not even knowing about it till it was too late. Grandparents are suffering tremendous pain over this. What about siblings? What does it do to a child to find out, and many of them find out before we realize that they have found out, when they learn that their mom killed one of their siblings by abortion? You ever try to imagine what that does to a young person? To their understanding of parenthood and understanding of life, understanding of God, understanding of their own value? We've only begun to scratch the surface on this. In fact, we work with psychiatrists and psychologists that are researching a phenomenon known as abortion survivor syndrome. And it has an incredible impact on our young people when they grow up realizing not just that a sibling has been aborted, many of them suffer from that, but just that they themselves were not protected when they were in the womb. If you were conceived in America after the Roe v. Wade decision of 1973, your life was not protected when you were in the womb. What does that even mean? I mean, I've never experienced a moment, and most of us here in this room can say, we've never experienced a moment when our life wasn't protected by law. Even to think that we could experience a moment like that, it really is hard to imagine. And yet, every single one of our fellow citizens who were conceived after January 22nd of 1973 can say that. They can say it, they can think it, they feel it, they experience it, and believe me, it impacts them. It also motivates them. You wonder why so many young people are involved in the pro-life movement and the March for Life. They're not just standing up for the babies in the womb right now, they're also standing up for themselves. And they're saying, you know what? I was a person when I was in the womb. I should have been protected. And I'm speaking out for my brothers and sisters that they might be protected now. So we begin with these two messages: alternatives to abortion, forgiveness and healing after abortion. By the way, practical resource, abortionforgiveness.com. Again, put in the zip code and you'll find healing programs for people who have had abortions closest to where the person lives. Among them are Rachel's Vineyard retreats, and I say our because I'm proud to serve as the pastoral director of Rachel's Vineyard. It's part of our ministry of Priests for Life. It's the largest ministry in the world for healing after abortion. And I know that there are Rachel's Vineyard retreats in this area, all throughout the country, just about all 50 states and a couple of dozen countries. And we have seen, it's a program based on solid psychological research, but even more importantly, on the power of the Word of God. And the retreats take people into the biblical events of healing and bring Jesus into the midst and bring them to Him to ask for that healing. It's just awesome. Look up Rachel's Vineyard, or you'll see some of the beautiful stories of what goes on in these retreats. I have ministered in the work of Rachel's Vineyard to people who have had as many as 25 abortions.
Oh, dear God.
And you wonder, first of all, how can the body endure that? Well, it can. But how can the soul endure that? I mean, why do you do something like that? It's a downward spiral of despair. And traumatic reenactment, if you're familiar with the psychology of trauma, part of it is traumatic reenactment. And when you have a trauma that you don't understand and can't control, the temptation is to recreate it so that you can gain some understanding and control over it. But secondly, what's happening there too is the phenomenon of, pregnancy is a biorhythm. You interrupt it, and your body on some level wants to go back and complete it, just like when you're interrupted in the middle of a good night's sleep. You know, every bone in your body wants to go right back to sleep. So there's a certain phenomenon that we call the replacement baby. Somebody has an abortion, and then something is urging them to get pregnant all over again. They get pregnant again, and then they think to themselves, I killed my child, I'm not worthy to be a mother, and then the temptation to abort kicks right back in. And so you have people having multiple abortions. In fact, if you're familiar at all with abortion statistics, over half of the abortions that occur every day in America are repeat abortions. These are people who have had at least one abortion before. Some 2, 3, 5, 10. And I would say even as many as 25. But you know what? Our message is simple. Even they can be healed. Even they can be holy. They too are called to be disciples who experience the salvation that comes from the only place it ever comes from, friends, Jesus Christ and His blood. It's not only the moms and the dads, the family members, as I mentioned already, but think about the friends. A friend drives her friend to have an abortion. She's not going to suffer her whole life just like that mom does when she realizes what happened. Of course she is. And she needs the healing, and she needs the ministry too. She needs people being aware of her pain. So many people involved. Again, the shockwaves of abortion. Check out the book over there on the table. Now, also, you know who else experiences the shockwaves? The abortionists. How many of you saw Unplanned? Okay, I was part of that story. I don't know if you realize this, but when Abby Johnson was working in that abortion facility there in Texas, she was also watching my TV programs about abortion on EWTN, the Catholic program. And she would watch it, and she told me afterwards, I got really mad. But I listened still. I listened. And one day, I was there with the 40 Days for Life team. I helped them to move it from a local to a national effort, and now, of course, international. Worked very closely with the team over all these years. And we were praying there in front of Abby's clinic. She looks out the window, and she recognizes them. And she said to her colleagues, hey, I know that priest. I watch him on TV. You think it'd be okay if I go out to say hi to Father Frank? And they said, are you nuts? You can't do that. So they dissuaded her from coming out. But you know what? As it turns out, I ended up meeting her not too long after that, because I was one of the leaders that she came to as soon as she left the abortion industry, because she knew of the work that we do with the people who have, in fact, left the abortion industry. And they have a unique path to healing. My brothers and sisters, they have a unique kind of wound. What does it do to you when you make your living by killing babies? Let me tell you. It does damage beyond what we can even describe. And we help a lot of these people on their journey. We have retreats for them too. In fact, there was one I remember where we had several women gathered in a room. And one of the parts of the journey of healing for these folks is that they have to count the number of lives they took. Because each one is a human life. And so part of the healing is to rehumanize that child. Give that child a name. Apologize to that child and to God for killing that child. They go through this process. They think about each and every baby they killed. Well, you know, we had a group of women sitting around in one of these retreats, and they calculated among all of them that the number of lives that group alone took in their career was 500,000 lives. And they sat there crying, lifting up their hands, talking about the abortion procedures, and they said to me, Father Frank, our hands were covered in the blood of these babies, because a lot of them were doing late-term abortions. Our hands were covered in their blood. We were splattered with the blood. And by the end of that retreat, those same eyes were shedding tears. And those same hands were lifted up. And those same lips were talking about blood, but they were talking about another blood. And they said, now we have seen that our hands and our hearts and our bodies and our minds and our souls are cleansed in the blood of another innocent person who died. And his name is Jesus Christ. And I want to tell you something. This is a little providential surprise that I had when I got here today. One of the women who has been on these retreats with me, because she too has found healing and forgiveness in Jesus Christ for the work she did in the abortion industry, is here among us today.
Wow.
Julie Wilkinson is here with her daughter and her husband. Julie, where are you? Would you come up here for one moment? I want to thank you for being here. As a matter of fact, now Julie we've known each other for quite a few years and have worked together on her journey of healing. And more recently, she's been sharing some of that journey publicly. And one of the things that inspired her to do that was the Unplanned movie. If you watch carefully the movie, in the scene where Abby Johnson sees the ultrasound of the abortion, guess who the nurse in the operating room is? That's Julie. Want to say a word?
I'm just thankful for so many people that are pro-life here. I'm thankful for people that talk to that one other person, give somebody support, help them feel like they don't have to take that step. You know, it's been treated casually for so long. And that's one of the reasons that I went to work in it, because I needed a job, I was in a new city, and that was a handy one. And I'd never planned to work there, but suddenly I was. And suddenly I was being trained more and more of what to do. And I was there about 2 years before I left, and by the grace of God, I went to work in a newborn intensive care unit. God has a sense of humor. But I kept it a secret for quite a long time because I was very ashamed. My husband knew, but I didn't want my girls to know, and really nobody at all until I went to Father Frank's retreat. I don't think more than 5 people in the world knew. And so it was a big relief to have somebody else who wouldn't have that flicker in their eyes when you told them something like that. So that was a big relief. But it's been a journey. And in the last year, because of Unplanned, and I knew that I could possibly be recognized by friends, that I decided it was time to step out and try to help by speaking at local pregnancy centers if they need a speaker, which I do at no cost, of course. And so I've done 6, and 7 and 8 are coming up pretty soon. So I'm so thankful for Father Frank, because people like him help bring us out of the darkness.
God bless you, Julie. There are thousands of them. Thousands of them. You come to know of some of them publicly. Abby Johnson, Carol Everett, Bernard Nathanson. I knew Bernard. Dr. Nathanson helped to start the abortion industry in this country. And he became pro-life. There's going to be a movie coming out next year called Roe v. Wade. And it'll have in it the story, part of it. It's not the main focus, but part of it will show that Dr. Nathanson also converted away from the abortion industry. I was close friends and the spiritual guide to Norma McCorvey. You know who Norma McCorvey was? The Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade. The plaintiff of the decision. Technically the winner of the case. She ended up rejecting abortion also. She, the winner, and this is a story that's not known as well as it needs to be.
Right.
But the Roe of Roe versus Wade rejected Roe versus Wade and worked for the final part of her life eagerly, fervently, to help bring an end to abortion and a reversal to that decision. She passed away just a couple of years ago, but I was privileged to be a spiritual guide to her, and My goodness, what a beautiful, wonderful person. And, this is something that, like we said before, we are starting with victory. And as was said in the civil rights movement, no lie can live forever. You can hide it for a while. You can push it down, it'll close the front door, it'll come out the back, close the back door, it'll go through the window, close the window, it'll come through the roof. One way or another, the truth will come out. And we're seeing this in countless people like Norma, like Dr. Nathanson, like Julie Wilkinson right here with us. Now, let me give you a few thoughts about the whole debate on abortion in this country. And let me say this, we're not really having one. There is so much about the abortion debate, which is not a debate at all. Did you see the I don't know how many of you could sit through it, taking a few, stomach relieving pills, the Democrat debates.
Oh, yeah.
The only way I can endure watching them, which I do watch, is I live tweet. So I get my sarcasm. It used to isn't Twitter great because it used to be you want to throw a shoe at the television. Now we just have to send a tweet. You can throw in a little sarcasm. It's okay. They deserve it. And so I think, what else I do? I sit there, I put my MAGA hat on. I have a MAGA hat. I was on with Sebastian Gorka the other day. I don't know how many of you listen to America First, so I'm on with him every once in a while. And I said, Sebastian, I'm a Catholic priest that wears a MAGA hat. And he said, yeah, we don't have enough of them. As a matter of fact, talk about fake news. Remember the Covington students back last January, right? Yeah. So shortly after that, an article came out that said that I was the one that sold them the MAGA hats. I don't know where they got that. I had never met the kids. But I said, what? The Washington Post reporter calls me up. Were you the priest that gave them the MAGA hats? I said, no, I don't even know them. I said, but I'll tell you this. I would have been proud to do so. But you know what? So look, what do I mean when I say we're not really having a debate about abortion in this country? You listen to these Democrat candidates. In fact, you listen to any abortion apologists, whether they be political or in the real world of academia or whoever it is. Maybe a friend or relative of your own, right? Tell me if they ever say any of these words. Decapitation, dismemberment, forceps, arms, legs, thighs, brain, skull, bones. These are words, I guarantee you take all the speeches of all the pro-abortion politicians, state level, federal level, anywhere in the world for that matter, you will never find any of those words. Those word search will come up empty. What do they talk about? Constitutional rights, women's health, freedom of choice. I got some new terms floating around, reproductive justice. Cory Booker wants to set up an office of reproductive freedom in his imaginary White House. Oh yeah, and they always come up with new language, but none of it has anything to do with abortion. See, this is my challenge to them. If you support abortion, describe abortion. I said this, I was speaking recently at a national workshop of journalists, religion news writers from secular papers across the country. And this is what I started out with. I said, listen, how many of you have written a story about abortion? And then I said to them, in that story, how many of you have used the following words? And I gave the litany of words that I just mentioned. They don't use those words. And unless they're going to describe abortion, and they're not getting the words from the Bible or the church or me or a pro-life group, I say to them, get the words from the abortionists. Go to the medical textbooks, like Warren Hearn's textbook called Abortion Practice. He uses the words decapitate to describe the abortion procedure. Dismember. He uses the words. He talks about taking out the skull in fragments. I mean, let me ask the question this way. If I stood on a public sidewalk, as I often do, holding a sign that didn't have any words on it, but simply showed an aborted baby, showed the dismembered body, the ugliness, the horror of an aborted baby. Just standing on the sidewalk showing an aborted baby. Now imagine I'm not dressed like this, okay? That might give away what my position is. I'm not handing out any flyers. I'm not saying any words. I'm just standing on a street corner, dressed normally, silently holding a picture of an aborted baby. What are people going to conclude? That I'm for it or against it? Right? Against it, right? But how do they know? For all they know, I'm advertising. Hey, folks, here's what you're going to get. Just go down the street, make a left turn, and there's an abortion clinic there, and here's what they're selling. Why wouldn't I be selling it? And this proves a point, doesn't it? That when we show it, or when we describe it, that's, for most people who still have a functioning conscience, that not only starts the discussion, it ends it. And it's clear that it's wrong. But even if it's not clear that it's wrong, that still has to be the starting point, because otherwise we're not talking about the same thing. I'm not talking about I believe in reproductive freedom. I don't believe any government should be dictating to a family how many children they're going to have. We believe in reproductive freedom. We just don't believe in killing children. As far as termination of pregnancy, this is so absurd. The arguments of the other side are so absurd. We can go into some more of them when we talk, those are going to come to the breakout. What is abortion? Oh, it's a termination of pregnancy. I say, well, so is birth. You ever hear of pregnancy that doesn't terminate? You know, perpetual pregnancy? You know? There are some people who are perpetually pregnant, but that's a different story. No pregnancy is perpetual. Every pregnancy terminates. The question is how? I mean, it's like people say, it's like somebody being hauled into court because he killed his spouse. Well, Your Honor, I didn't kill her, I just terminated our marriage. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous, right? But you can do anything with language. You can justify anything with language. You can manipulate it every which way you want. And that's why, again, our challenge to the other side is simply this. You believe in this so much? Describe it for us and show it to us. And if you have people you're talking to, you're trying to convince them about their opinion about abortion, we have a website called lookatabortion.org. Challenge them to look at the pictures. Oh, well, I don't need to see that. That's what most of them will tell you. Well, yes, you do. Go back and look at it, and then we'll come and we'll have our conversation. Because otherwise, you know what? You're just talking past each other. You're talking about an act of violence that kills a baby, and they're talking about reproductive rights and freedom and women's health. But those are two separate conversations. Yeah. If we're going to debate abortion, well, for goodness sake, let's do it. And let's talk about that topic specifically. Now look, we got an election coming up, and you know, we already established, in fact, in several of the talks today, it's already very clear, and we are all convinced of it, that unless government protects life, it is failing in its most fundamental responsibility. But there's another dimension here in terms of the defense of human life. And I've been very explicit about this with the clergy and with everybody else, and you'll see it on our broadcasts, that it is not possible at this point to advocate for the protection of the unborn and to be politically neutral. You know, we have, for a while it was. When I started out with Priests for Life, there were dozens of pro-life Democrats in the House of Representatives. Now, Dan Lipinski, who I consider a friend, and we talk frequently, we've been to Rome together, and meetings and all the rest. And a couple of others, Democrats in the House, a couple of others who some of the time vote the right way on pro-life. But you look at every vote that has been held in Congress on this issue, and you basically see, for the last several Congresses, party line votes, split right down the middle. Why? Why should that be? And what a contradiction it is, by the way. You know, Pope Francis came to the United States a few years ago, and a whole host of House Democrats, all of them pro-abortion, signed a letter welcoming the Pope and saying, "We join with you wholeheartedly in your advocacy for social justice and for defending the most vulnerable among us." And I put out a statement and I said, "No, you don't. You do not stand for the most vulnerable among us. You kill the most vulnerable among us." What a hypocrisy. What a sham. This is nonsense. When they try to say, oh yeah, we're the most vulnerable among you, you are not. The most vulnerable among us are the children living in the womb. And brothers and sisters, the blind spot here is absolutely unprecedented and unequaled by any other blind spot in our society. When people literally can, one of the members of our pastoral team works with us full time is Alveda King. How many of you have met Alveda or heard her speak? She's doing a wonderful job all across the country. You see her a lot on TV. She works with us full time, proclaiming that the civil rights movement of today is the pro-life movement. And proclaiming that her uncle Martin Luther King Jr., he would have been marching with us for life, because this is the same issue, simply applied to a different group of human beings whose rights are being violated and whose equality before the law is being denied. And so Alveda and I, we're often at family functions of hers, and not the least of which being, of course, the annual national commemoration on Martin Luther King Day there in the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. And we're there sitting for hours on end listening to all this inspiring, really inspiring preaching and speaking about equality and justice and the unfinished work of the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. And consistently, while every group of oppressed people, marred by every kind of violence imaginable, is mentioned, the ones that are not mentioned are the children in the womb. And we say to them, Alveda, in fact, has sat there, and amidst the applause, she has literally stood up and said, and the children, don't forget the unborn children. She had shouted it out in Ebenezer Baptist Church. In fact, her mother, Naomi, sister-in-law of Martin Luther King Jr., and some of her cousins have all signed on to a statement called The Beloved Community and the Unborn. A beautiful statement you'll find on our website that says, you know what? The beloved community cannot be the beloved community unless it includes the unborn. And that's what we're saying to these people is, hey, be what you are. Just include the unborn. Advocate for justice. Just include the children. Just don't forget them. But brothers and sisters, with this election coming up, pro-life people have got to understand one simple thing. You want to see the protection of the unborn? With the political configuration we have right now, there is only one political path forward for the protection of these children. And that is the re-election of Donald Trump as our president and the re-election and expansion of a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. Unless you have all of those three things, there will not be any kind of legislation moving forward, not to mention the composition of our courts. What are we up to now? 180 federal judges across this nation that the president has put in place, and as Mitch McConnell said, we are going to leave no vacancy behind. They are going to continue to put on these courts men and women who understand that our Constitution is silent on abortion and that we cannot invent a constitutional right that wasn't there to begin with. Brothers and sisters, one of the things I've given you is an election prayer. I want to encourage you to use that. Electionprayer.com. That's that's where you'll find this prayer. And we're going to talk about a lot of other practical resources when we go into our workshops. Never doubt it. The days of abortion in this country are numbered. Thank you for what you're doing to hasten that day. God bless you.
Hey, Jesse, you want to come down?